Greetings Internet, DDA here, and welcome to my first Perceptive build online. I've been doing a lot of black style playing. Black style is definitely my favorite style in the game, but I actually haven't gotten much experience with the Perceptive Mastery. Well, that's changing now because probably in the past 4 or 5 days I've gotten about 30 games in with this Black Perceptive deck. Black Perceptive Trunks. If you watched one of my previous videos, I talked about how the devious build for Trunks, I found some flaws in it, so I thought that switching it to Perceptive would fill in some of those gaps, and I was definitely right. So I want to share this build with you guys. So sit back and enjoy my Trunks Perceptive Sword Beatdown build 1.0. So let's just scan over the list here real quick. So this build is a little different, well, kind of fairly different than the devious build. I play a different level 3. That's probably the biggest change. A lot more blocks. Not very many planning cards, only about 7 planning cards. As well as, I really enjoy the fact that I can just rely on the Perceptive Mastery to give me my board control. This build's working out really well for me. So let's get started here and talk about the attacks. So these are the attacks that we're working with. We're running about 25 physical attacks and 8 energy. So again, as classic with Trunks, you know, high power level, we're going to be running a lot of physical attacks. However, we do have a fair amount of energies in here, and I really like how that's actually been allowing me to use this unstoppable energy very often. I've used it very many times. The best is making this guy unstoppable and getting that free card advantage over the opponent, or making this an unstoppable energy web depending on the matchup. So, but you can see we're still running the sword package, running the all 9 sword attacks. And I had some people say to me, you know, in Perceptive, why would you run the sword? Why would you run the sword package when you have 6 non-styled attacks? Well, this card offers just amazing discard pile removal, as well as making the attack unstoppable. This card is just power damage, anti-anger, and gives you card advantage. This card is clearly strong enough to include in this deck regardless of whether or not it activates your mastery. I have enough styled attacks. I mean, those are my only really non-styled. I have these 6 and I'll dig your grave, and the rest are styled attacks. So I'm fine with that. I play, let's see, I think around 25 styled attacks, so almost half styled attacks. So really good number here. So, I mean, you know how powerful this card is. Black Double Team and Black Shoulder Charge are both adds because of the Perceptive Mastery. And the combos that you can do with both of these cards are staggering with Black Discovery. Because this card, when it's destroyed, it just goes into your hand. And this card, you can use a critical damage effect. So you can actually use critical damage effects when entering combat, steal Dragon Balls when entering combat, or kill allies when entering combat. Very strong. It actually allows you the potential to maybe, like if the opponent has a Gohan ally in play that's preventing you from using your sword stance, you could Discovery, kill the Black Shoulder Charge, killing Gohan with a critical damage effect, and then enable yourself to stance when entering combat. So really good cards. Both cards have endurance, and this card also allows you to set up Shoulder Charge, allows you to set up your mastery. You place any card in play on the top of your life, in your discard pile on the top of your life deck, as well as do the same for your opponent. So you give your opponent a mediocre card, and then you give yourself on top either a Black Double Team, Black Protection, or Black Shoulder Charge to activate some ability with your mastery. 3 Black Flying Knees. This card is just really great, especially late game when you know what's left in your opponent's deck. I've called it right a few times with this deck. So, and when you do it, it just feels so good because you get that unstoppable 6 and 6. And then obviously an unstoppable. This is a game sealer. That's what this card is in here for. It's a game sealer, and it's done that for me a few times. It's definitely at least made my opponent sweat every time I played it. And I'm getting better with it, but this card is very difficult to use in this deck. If you don't feel comfortable using it, I would switch it out. I have thought about switching this out sometimes already, but I've called it right enough, correct enough, enough times for me to keep it in, as well as it combos nicely with Shoulder Charge and Evasion. But like I said, this is definitely a very difficult card to use, so if you find yourself not calling it right and you don't feel comfortable with it, I would take it out of this build. Black Lunge is just a solid attack. I wanted more AT damage in this deck, as well as Piecewise Anger. The main mode of leveling of this deck is, of course, Discovery and Stance, but I wanted to allow myself to be able to level without those. You know, sometimes things happen, you know, you get your stances scouted, or you never manage to draw a Discovery, as well as the Mastery gives Anger, so I wanted to be able to utilize the Anger that the Mastery was giving me. Got 3 black chin kicks, and they're in here for the same reason the Lunge is. I want to utilize Anger, and it doubles Anger. So this is a 2 to 3 Anger card very easily. Also, it shuts down allies, and it's really nice to be able to just pack on the damage on your opponent's MP and isolate your opponent in combat. 3 black defensive bursts, and I actually play 3 defensive bursts over 2 energy webs. And the reason for this is Cell. And I hate when Cell just starts leveling up and down with his level 3 and level 4. So stop him from doing that by defensive bursting and stopping him from using his level 3 physical attack. Also, there's just a ton of really strong physical attacks, and they're much easier to use. You know, this is a physical beat deck, so chances are you're going to be knocking your opponent to 0, so lock him out of everything with defensive burst. I'll Dig Your Grave at 2. The only downside to this card is it doesn't activate your Mastery. You have a lot of leveling in this deck already, and that's pretty much it. This is a solid card. I did drop it down to 2 because I didn't feel like I needed 3, but I've been thinking about upping it again to 3 because it's just that good, especially against the Roshi matchup. Hey guys, you remember this card? I loved this card in my old school Trunks builds, and it's back like a storm. It is amazing and perceptive. I don't play Confrontation in this build, if you've noticed that already, and this is basically super Confrontation in perceptive. You name a card, you know, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to know a card in your opponent's hand with either the level 2 or just, you know, looking at what your opponent has in the field, looking at what your opponent discards. Again, this card is definitely a more advanced card to play. It's a little bit easier to use than the Flying Knee, and I highly recommend you playing it over Confrontation in this build because you can pressure, not only does it give you Anger, you can pressure board clears with your Mastery as well as taking a card out of your opponent's hand. It's really, really strong. Standard here, Black Empowered Sword Slash, can't go wrong with that. This card has just been having such mileage in this deck, doing a solid 5 life cards, threatening critical damage, as well as getting you a card out of your opponent's hand. And Black Energy Web, following up, last attack in the deck, really strong here. I just like locking the opponent out of attacks. Both Black Energy Web and Defensive Burst are really strong staples in Perceptive. You know, everything has board clear, so why not lock your opponent out of his hand and while locking him out of his board. So that's the attacks, guys. So now let's go over the blocks and events. So here's the blocks that we're working with and events. You can see I'm running a lot more blocks in this build, and something that I found was that I was generating huge hands with this deck, huge hands with the level 3, along with Aggressive Sword Drill. So I was drawing a lot of cards and, you know, generating myself extra card advantage with Black Protection, the Mastery, and Black Double Team. So I would have these huge hands, but when my hands were being filled with attacks, I would just, you know, sometimes lose as much damage as I was generating against my opponent. So considering that I have a lot of hand advantage, I like a fair amount of blocks to be able to stop the few attacks that my opponent can send at me. So we got finger block in here, pretty standard, running at 2 copies right now. For extra stages, we do play a lot of energies, as well as 2 of our physicals cost stages. So despite the mastery, and this is why I only run it at 2, the mastery gives us stages, but sometimes a little extra stages are nice. Knee catch, again, incremental anger. There are a few cards in this deck that gain 2 anger. There's the swirl and the knee catch. And then that's pretty much it. The chin kick just doubles the anger. You got a lunge with anger, and then that's it, just the mastery then. But I have leveled a few times with anger, so don't overlook that. Don't discredit that. 3 black swipe is mainly in here for the endurance as well as the banishing. This deck doesn't run too much endurance, so I just have a hard time dropping my swipe count lower than 3. 2 evasions are amazing to set up with the mastery, as well as set up with black flying knee against your opponent. You know, the great thing about evasion is it's a block, so you can immediately respond with an action. So you can black evasion, black protection at the top, and then immediately respond with your mastery to draw a card. Now, I only run 2 black protections. I ran 3, I dropped it down to 2 because I found I was drawing it too much in my hand. I mean, there are some matchups where I want to draw in my hand. Heavy energy beatdown matchups like maybe blue or blue Yamcha. So there are some matchups where I'd like to draw it, but I dropped it down to 2, and I like the feel of 2 copies in this deck. So I don't think I think I'll keep it at 2. You can see we don't play that many events in here. Not really that many events. We got no confrontations. If I had spheres, I would probably play a single sphere in this deck, but I don't have any, sadly. But we got 2 scout maneuvers. Love this card. Great in so many different matchups. Great in the cell matchup, regardless of the color of cell. You know, you either can, against Namekian, if you get him before Leaping Kick, name Leaping Kick. You can name Hybrid Defense, you know, against any other cell deck, just name Draining Attack. Yamcha, it's great against, you know, name Yamcha's Rescue. It's great against Master Roshi as well. Name is Backstrike, so you get both of those out, so you can just punish him with Black Reflection. Black Reflection is MVP of this deck. I love this card. I've really considered adding a 3rd copy into this deck. I'm on the fence about it. I kind of want to. 2 copies just is perfect, though. It's in my hand whenever I want, and usually not in my hand when early game, which, depending on the matchup, chances are I don't really want it early game. And I added a single copy of Overwhelming Power into this deck as my only form of hard removal, mainly for the blue matchup, because I was finding that the board control Perceptive gives you is great, but when you play blue and they drop down a bunch of blue blockades, you have this wall that you can't get through. Like, you have to hit attacks in order to control the board, and if you can't hit attacks, then you have a problem. So I added in a single copy of Overwhelming Power, as well as it really helps tutoring it with VTP to allow yourself to use a critical damage effect. So we have a few, and because critical damage is another thing, this deck doesn't do critical damage very easily unless it gets to the 4, which then everything's just doing a ton of damage. But so Overwhelming Power single copy has been added such value to this deck. So that's the blocks and events. So now let's talk about the planning cards. So really not that many planning cards, guys. Severely reduced from the Devious build. Obviously, we can't use setups and drills in our hand with the Perceptive Mastery like you can with Devious for discarding. So because of that, all of the planning cards that we play are extremely high value. Like, these are planning cards that you don't mind drawing into your hand. Like, you don't want to draw these in your hand, but if they're in your hand in combat, the power that you gain by playing them next turn is great enough to warrant the dead card in your hand in combat, especially this one. This card is Black Discovery, the card, the reason that we play Trunks. And like I said in my first video, if anyone asks you why you're playing Trunks, like why do you play Trunks over another personality, all you have to do is take out this card and show it to them, because it's that good. It wins the Cell matchup. Guys, I am very comfortable against Cell. If you're having trouble with Cell, I suggest you try Trunks, because this card is just a savior against Cell. Very strong. As well as, you know, most of these cards generate you card advantage. Most of them do. So, you know, of the 7 planning cards we have in this deck, drawing any of them at any point in the game is just a good thing for you. So now let's go over some of the bench cards, some of the cards I wish I could have included in this deck but didn't find the room. So here are some of the bench cards that I'm considering for this deck. There are a lot of good cards in here, a lot of cards that I wish I could have included in the deck, but hey, we only got 60 cards, so every single card choice has to be scrutinized. So first up here we got Black Delay. Love this card. It was recently clarified in the CRD. For those of you who don't understand what the CRD was referring to, basically any card that would normally banish after use, if you Black Delay it, it's still going to banish from their hand. So if you send a card, an attack, a physical attack that's banished after use back into their hand, it'll banish from their hand after you resolve Black Delay, and you're not going to be discarding a random card with Black Delay. So the only cases where you'll be discarding a random card is a non-banished after use physical combat, or just, you know, it just has to be non-banished after use. So really good card in the format right now with Cell. Cell is the main reason why I wanted to add this card into my deck, because you just block his level 3 power and you get a free discard on him. Black Request, I really want to add this card into my deck. It's great for setting up Flying Knee, as well as doubling up on maybe some, you know, Black Defensive Burst or Black Energy Swirl for some anger, maybe Black Chin Kick. There are a bunch of different things you can do with this card. I really want to add, if I did add it into my deck, I would add maybe 1 copy just to try it out for a little bit. At most I'd ever play is 2 copies. Black Empowered Elbow is great in the orange matchup, but I played it for a little bit, but I opted to switch it out for Overwhelming Power, but I'm still keeping it on the bench because it's still pretty strong. And if I find that orange is a problem, which I haven't yet, the Perceptive Mastery is really good at controlling orange early game, and as long as I put on early game pressure with my mastery, orange has not been a problem. Black Capture is just one of those cards that is always on the chopping block, always thought of to add into a deck. It just adds so much damage to your overall game. You know, every time your opponent passes, you can remove another 2 cards off the top of his life deck. It can really force him in combat, force him to go aggressive on you when he maybe doesn't have the most optimal hand, just for him to try to remove it. And considering that I added in a lot more blocks into this deck, Black Capture definitely is a card that I would consider. And you can make it unstoppable too, which is another good thing. Black Disorienting Blow is in my set 1 builds, and I really like it. I've seen this card resurfacing. It's pretty good just to pull out like a Black Scout Maneuver or a Confrontation Stare Down out of your opponent's deck. And since this deck doesn't play Confrontation and Stare Down, I've considered it. But it is, you know, on the low end of the bench. There are a lot of other cards that I would consider adding before I would add this one. But it's still powerful enough to consider in your build. So that's the bench cards that I have for you. So now let's talk about the general strategy and how you're going to fare in certain matchups. Alright, so let's go over a general strategy for this deck. So much like, well, a little bit different than the Devious matchup, you're still pretty weak in the beginning with this deck. But something that's different with this deck and the Devious matchup is you can actually combo very well with the Perceptive Mastery. So if you enter as the aggressor, you get to look at the top 4. So if you happen to see any of these combo cards with your you're in the top 4, you're actually in a really good position to generate some early game card advantage for you. You can either just get this card to your hand or choose one of the other 3 cards to draw with Black Protection. Really good. Shoulder Charge not necessarily is good discarding early game. Chances are your opponent is not going to have like a strong Dragon Ball in play for you to steal or an ally for you to kill. But the other 2 are really strong when you see them early game when you enter. But overall, depending on the matchup, so if you play like a really aggressive deck, you're going to want to play a little passively in the beginning. That's not to say that you won't enter combat, but it's to say that you're going to want to wait. You're really going to want to try to wait until you get either a Black Discovery or an aggressive Sword Drill. One of those 2. One of these 2, not only do they generate you card advantage, but they also get you a level. And you really want to try to get off the level 1 as fast as possible. The level 1 is your weakest level. It's your slowest start. You're only a D on your top stage. You don't have high power level. You're limited in how well you can use your power. You're limited in what you can remove with your power. It's just, it's your weakest level. So you want to try to jump off of it as quickly as possible. So if you happen to draw one of these early, you know that chances are you'll throw one down, and then next turn you'll want to enter. Because you want to generate that card advantage, especially if you draw an aggressive Sword Drill, because then you'll actually still be a clear card down on the opponent. Whereas with this, but you also want to consider, when you do level, you can actually offset the disadvantage that you have with this level 2. Because if you can just simply take out one really good card, like give your opponent a dead card, give your opponent an energy sphere when you don't have any events in your hand, or an energy block when you have all physical attacks, or a physical block when you have all energy attacks. And I've done both. So, and that makes up for the card disadvantage that you're not generating card advantage with really either of these cards, especially this one, because you're just getting a level. And whereas this one can sometimes give you some discard abilities, if you hit a protection or you hit a black double team. But, level 2, you're in a much better place. I've played a bunch of matchups against Cell, and I really feel this deck is strong against Cell, mainly because of Black Discovery, especially against non-Namekian Cell. If you play Namekian Cell, depending on the matchup, if you draw a Black Scout Maneuver in your hand early, you may want to go aggressive. There are a lot of matchups that are just taken out by Black Scout Maneuver early, and even if you take more damage than your opponent, you may be able to just cripple him with the Black Scout Maneuver, and that might be worth you entering in early. The late game with this deck is extremely strong. So you can kind of take some early hits and be okay and come back in the mid to late game. That's possible. You can easily do that. Your 3 generates you card advantage, as well as your 4 just makes every single attack that you play hit like a truck. Like, they're not going to want to let any attacks hit because of how powerful they are. So if you draw an early Scout Maneuver, you may want to enter combat. If you draw one of these, you're definitely going to want to enter next combat. Pass, get the full card advantage, and then enter. Another card that's really good to see in your hand on the level 2 is, of course, Black Swirl. Especially when you have this little combo. Because if you enter on your opponent, you can actually look at his top 4, destroy the best 2 cards he has, and then name another one that he can't use. So you're basically like almost killing 3 cards out of his hand. I've done that a few times. The amount of manipulation with this deck is amazing. And I promise you guys, if you play this deck, you're going to have loads and loads of fun. Not only is it really fun, but it's also very effective. I'm taking out a few cards out of my opponent's hand. I'm making him useless. I'm manipulating what he can do in combat. It's really powerful. And you're doing that all while pushing damage and controlling the board. And that's why Perceptive Mastery is so great with Trunks. So it's pretty easy. You have 5 level cards, plus you have Piecewise Anger. It's pretty easy for you to hit the 3. And once you're this 3, you are very, very happy because you're generating card advantage and you're getting to look at the top 6 and rearrange. The top 6 rearrange is very important in this deck because you're going to be able to set up all these discard abilities. And late game is when Black Shoulder Charge really shines. You know, the opponent is gonna probably play down Dragon Ball 7. If you can activate Black Shoulder Charge when entering combat, you can steal 7 and set up your own hand. You can steal 7 and set up what card you want to draw with your level 3. Really strong. If you play a more passive deck like Roshi and Yamcha, you're going to pretty much want to keep pressure on him always. You're not going to want to enter with a suboptimal hand though, especially against Yamcha. You have to consider against Yamcha that he's going to have that block every combat with his power. So what you do against Yamcha, you'll enter combat, shoot off your big physical attacks before he does his power, and then save your energy. Save the black empowered sword slash in your hand. You know? And then after he shoots off his power, hit black empowered sword slash. It'll throw him off, and this deck can do that. It can switch between physical and energy that readily. It's pretty easy for you to level and get to the 4. I think I've gotten to 4 most games. And once you're here, you're just going to want to try to do your best to disrupt what your opponent is doing and just throw attacks at him. You know, all you need to do is hit 1 or 2 attacks on this level to completely decimate your opponent. Strong matchups, I would say, would be Cell. I'm not sure. Definitely non-Namekian. Non-Namekian Cell, you have, because they have limited leveling options. And if you can manage to get out a discovery before he gets to level 3, you can almost seal the game for yourself right there. Because he'll only be able to draining probably once a game, and the discovery will just negate that for you. Even if he levels, even if he gets to the level 4, you still are in a good position because discovery allows you to de-level him before he can use his level 4 power to tutor. So you'll de-level him and you'll only have to deal with the 7 life card physical. You were going to have to deal with that anyway. He was going to de-level you, but you know, using the discovery, you're saving yourself a D-level, you're taking a card away from him, and you're dealing with the level 3 physical that you're going to deal with anyway. Against Cell, you definitely want to covet the defensive burst, as I mentioned earlier. You know, if you could possibly D-level him with discovery, hit a defensive burst, and then, you know, keep him on the level 3 for another combat. Against Roshi, you're going to want to covet your I'll-Dig-Your Graves. You know, Roshi does a lot of prevention damage, so when you see I'll Dig Your Grave in your hand, you know you want to go aggressive. Especially if he's on level 1. But overall, guys, this deck is extremely good. I love it. It is 10 times better. 10 times better than the Devious build. And I promise you guys, you know, try this build out, compare it to the Devious build, let me know. Its damage output is a little bit lower, but it makes up for that by jumping to the level 4 very quickly and adding damage modifiers to all your attacks. It's really strong, and I like it actually a lot better than the Devious build, but I haven't forgot about Devious. I'm gonna actually be altering my Devious build. It's gonna be a lot different. It's actually gonna be a camp level 1 deck. It's gonna be a camp level 1 deck, which is much different than any of the other Devious builds that I've come out with so far. But I think you guys are going to like it because it's going to generate a lot of card advantage. Smooth this drill and this drill. Smooth this drill and this drill. Just imagine it, guys. So, but it's not in this build because obviously you level so much that smoothness will just be discarded. So I hope you guys enjoyed my first Perceptive build. The first Perceptive Mastery has grown on me. So thank you, Kelly Dennis. Thank you. You've turned me. Shout out, you know, you've been telling me about Perceptive Mastery for a while. It's really good, and I strongly believe that, you know, this deck was made with this card. It was made with it. This card is now quintessential Black Perceptive Mastery right here. It was made with this. So I'm okay with having waited this long to play Perceptive Mastery, but it is very strong. So thank you for turning me on to it. And, you know, rate, comment, subscribe below. Let me know what you think of the deck. And stay tuned for my Devious deck build. That'll be coming out soon. I'm going to be releasing an updated nail build for you guys. As well as I've been messing around with my Raditz build even more. So I may update that build as well. As well as I have a Cell deck that I've been working on. Cell Empowered. I'll release that for you guys. That's sure to be a meta deck. So you guys can see that build and play around with it. But other than that, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.